Connected Homeschooling, Episode 8.
Welcome to the Connected Homeschooling Podcast, where we connect homeschooling families like yours with leaders, authors, speakers, and all-around interesting people who provide great conversations, tips, and advice. Now here's your host, Devin Dabney.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Connected Homeschooling Podcast. I'm your host, Devin Dabney, and I'm glad to be back for another episode. This week, my guest is LaToya Edwards. She's a blogger and also a single homeschooling mom. She's a parent to 2 boys, and this week she offers some perspective from the vantage point of a single mom who homeschools. We discuss her homeschooling journey, and we also talk about her blog and things that she writes about there. So stay tuned for that interview with LaToya Edwards. She's a self-described daughter of the king. She's a single homeschooling mother of 2, and she's also a blogger. LaToya, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Now, I know that you bring an interesting perspective to our listeners, and I actually ran across you as part of the blogging team on Heidi St. John's team, and so I wanted to reach out to you and just give you an opportunity to share with our audience today. So I'm just delighted to have you here. Now, each week we begin the show by starting with an inspirational scripture or a quote, and it's just something that would be encouraging to our audience. And you have a scripture or quote that you'd like to share with us?
I actually do. It's Hebrews chapter 13, and it's verses 20 to 21. And it just says, "Now may the God of peace, who brought up from the dead our Lord Jesus, the great shepherd of the sheep, and ratified an eternal covenant with his blood, may he equip you with all you need for doing his will, and may he produce in you, through the power of Jesus Christ, every good thing that is pleasing to him. All glory to him forever and ever. Amen." And that is probably like my cling-to verse that I have, especially on days where I don't think I'm going to make it to lunchtime.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. Now, what we're going to do is we'll talk homeschooling for a moment. And I know that this is something that our guests are anxious to hear about, and everyone has their own different story of how they got into homeschooling. But why don't you, and actually before that, let's take a look at who you are. Just introduce yourself and give us just a short intro of who LaToya Edwards is before we get into homeschooling.
Okay, well, I am, as you said before, I'm a single mom. I have 2 boys. They are right now 7, and my little guy just turned 5. And I am, just a mom. I have a kind of interesting journey. I grew up as an Army brat. My dad was in the Army for most of my childhood, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And I just remember growing up thinking that was the worst thing that a woman could ever do with her life, was to stay home with her kids. Like, I vowed that I would never, ever, 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 ever do that, ever. I was going to go to school, I was going to get married, I was going to have this career, and I would see my kids, for an hour at dinner time and maybe a few hours on the weekend. And so I kind of pursued that path for a while. I made good grades. I went to undergrad. I actually have a law degree that I'm not using right now. And somewhere along those lines, I got married and I had my kids, and my heart started to change. And I just realized that, really what I wanted to do was just to be a mom. So my family thinks that I'm completely nuts because I have 2 bachelor's degrees and a law degree, and I'm doing absolutely nothing with it. But I have to tell you that I could not be happier being at home with my little guys. It's just really where my heart is, and I'm privileged, and I just feel so blessed I'm able to be here with them.
Wow, thanks for sharing. Well, you mentioned about, I guess, some of the opposition and different things. I guess that kind of leads us into your homeschooling journey. I know when we're talking off air, we're just communicating about just some of the issues with maybe having people who are on the other side of things, maybe as educators and teachers. But how did you get into homeschooling or even find out about homeschooling?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it. I actually had no idea that there was a such thing as homeschooling until my oldest son was about, I want to say, so he wasn't born yet. I actually met my doula for my oldest son, and she also was my childbirth teacher, class teacher. She was homeschooling her children. And I remember going to go meet her, and we were, kind of getting to know one another, and I was like, oh, you've got, two girls. Like, where do they go to school? And she said, oh, I homeschool. And I just remember kind of looking at her like, what? And so as we kind of had our classes, she was sharing with me about what she did for homeschooling. And I thought, oh, well, that's nice, but that just sounds kind of crazy. And so she kind of planted the bug in my ear. And then while I was going to law school, my oldest son was in daycare. And then a year later, my second son came along, and they were in school. And I kind of started seeing, behavior problems coming up with the boys. And just my oldest son is very gifted. And so he was bored, and he was terrorizing the preschool. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, like he is going to be a handful in public school. And I thought, well, that's okay. I'm going to law school. I'll just get a good job, and he can go to private school. And so I kept going down that path, and my mind kept kind of going back to this homeschooling thing. And then I started seeing the Duggars show on TV, and I saw that they homeschooled, and I saw like how respectful and wonderful their kids were. And so I started to dig into it a little more. And the more that I looked into it and researched it, the more I liked it. And then when my oldest son was about 3 years old, he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And as I began to kind of look into that and how that worked for him and some of the things that he was struggling with, that kind of sealed the deal for me. I just could look at my son and say that there was no way that he was going to be able to grow and function in a regular school setting. So I think it was probably when he was about 3 that I set my mind to homeschooling, and I just have kind of been taking steps to make sure that we were able to do that, and thankfully, we have been. But it really was a fluke because I have about 5 close family members that are either teachers or administrators. My pastor, before he passed, had been in the school system. He was a superintendent for many, many years. I was a product of public school. So it was a very strange decision for my family when I said, I'm going to homeschool. I mean, I thought that they reacted weird when I told them that I was going to have my second son at home in a birthing tub, but that was like nothing compared to the reaction that I got when I said that we were going to homeschool. Yeah, it was funny. I mean, they thought I was crazy before. I think it sealed the deal when I said I was going to homeschool. Especially being a single mom, I heard a lot of, well, are you allowed to homeschool as a single mom? And, well, how is that going to work? And, your son has all these special needs. There are professionals that know how to handle that, and probably all the typical things that homeschooling families hear. I heard a lot of the same things. But people really, I think they felt more strongly about it because, as a single mom, like, don't you think you should be working? Like, you need to put them in school and get a full-time job and, this and that. So it's been a bit of a struggle kind of having the support, from the family. But I always tell people, that's why I love that verse, when God calls you to something, like Hebrew says, he will equip you with everything that you need to do his will. And I am finding that is true. Every year that we homeschool, I'm finding that to be more and more and more true, that he really will give me everything that I need to do this task that he's called me to do. Because otherwise, I think I would have given up a long time ago.
Wow, that's great. Now, let's get into a little bit more of, I guess, the mechanics behind your homeschooling. Is there any particular curricula or any particular methods that you're using?
Yes, we are a very, very much a Charlotte Nation family, and this is actually the first year that we've kind of embraced it because I really, really wanted to be a classical education family. And I tried with everything in me over the last 2 years to force my children to be classical learners, and I finally realized last year that they weren't having none of that. So I kind of took a step back, and I have a really good friend, and she has graduated. One child has one that's about to graduate, and she is very much into Charlotte Mason, and she was explaining to me the principles, and I thought, well, wow, that makes a lot of sense. So that is the method that we really use here, and it really works well for me having boys, especially having little boys. For her philosophy was having short lessons and we do all of our lessons in the daytime, and we have the afternoons so they can run around and those things. We do lots of read alouds, and it's been just a blessing. I mean, our school time this year looks radically different than it did for the past 2 years, and it's actually working, and I'm not screaming like a crazy person, and my kids aren't crying, so it's been a blessing. And I also use my father's world, is what I have been using for the last 3 years, and we love, their stuff. It's Christian worldview. It's, Charlotte Mason focused. It's got great fun activities. It's got Bible in there, and it's just really fun. And I like that my boys can use some of the lessons together, some of the subjects. That's always awesome. And I also love that I can reuse the same things over and over again. So I've only had to buy the curriculum one time, and I just kind of pass it down to my little guy when Big Brother gets done with it.
Now, you mentioned some of the opposition. Are there any other challenges that you found with homeschooling?
I think for me, my biggest one has just been feeling like inadequate. I have days where I just wake up and I think, what am I doing? I can't teach these kids what they need to know. I don't have the patience for it. I don't know how to start. I don't like to do these messy experiments because they stress me out. And what am I going to do when we get to calculus? And what am I going to do for science? And so I kind of have that inner dialogue that likes to kind of try to talk me out of, knowing that I can do this. So I do have that. And then I just have my running joke with my friends is that I'm a recovering perfectionist. And a lot of people, they know what that means. But I just, you have this idea of what your ideal homeschool is going to look like. And then you have the reality. And so I struggle a lot with letting go of that ideal and living in the reality, and not only living in the reality of it, but just seeing the good that's here.
Okay. And I think those are some common challenges that people discover with homeschooling, especially like you mentioned. You look at some of the subject matter or the topics that should be covered, especially in those high school years, and you often wonder about it. But from what I've seen, in many cases, people prevail one way or the other, and it's not all the time that you have to do it all yourself. It definitely pays to have some support.
Yes, well, and it's funny, too, because my one friend, I remember I was flipping out one day, and I called her, and she was like, LaToya, they're 7 and 5. Just deal with 7 and 5. Stop thinking about 15. Just deal with elementary school and deal with the rest as it comes. And I was like,
makes sense to me.
I know. I was like, well, if you want to make sense, I guess I could do that.
Now, I'm sure you've encountered this question, and it's something that often comes up when people say that they homeschool. What is your answer to the question, what about socialization?
Oh, yes, that is probably my favorite question to get asked, because usually I just laugh, and because for me, I understand that that's kind of a ridiculous question. And so what I usually say to people is I want to ask them, number one, what do they mean by socialization? Are they asking me, when do my kids interact with other people? That's one answer. And if they want to know, the real definition of socialization, which is, are they, learning to conform to society standards, that's a whole separate conversation. And so I just kind of point out to people that, number one, kids are in trouble if they're socializing in the school system. You're supposed to sit in your desk and be quiet, and you're not allowed to talk. So there's not really a lot of socialization going on in that aspect in a public school system. And then I also make a point to point out that a lot of the stuff that kids are picking up, not always good stuff that they pick up from other kids, and that, homeschooling or not, that's just not something that, I'm trying to keep as much of that out as I can. And, and then I just hope to know that, really for my family and for my boys, we do the same things that we did when they were preschoolers and babies. It's not rocket science. We go to the park and there's kids there. We go to church and there's kids there. They have swimming lessons. There's kids there. We live right next to the playground at our apartment complex. There's children there. So they're not hurting for, interaction with other people, and they have their best friends, and they also are homeschoolers, so we get together. And I just love that. And people always ask, don't you think that they're going to be weird and, like, awkward? And I'm like, well, no, not really, because I have watched my little guy, 5 years old. You know, we went to Chick-fil-A one time, and I watched him engage another grown-up in a conversation for about 15 minutes. And I don't know many 5-year-olds, you know, that can actually hold a conversation that long, you know, thing. And I've actually gotten to the point now where it's one of those questions that I kind of refuse to talk about almost, because a lot of people that are asking me that, they're kind of, you know, upset and they're trying to get a reaction from me. And I would rather, you know, do something else than to get into an argument over the socialization issue, because it's almost never ending.
That's totally understandable. So, as far as the time with your children and I guess the schooling, what's an ideal day, if there is such a thing, for a homeschooling family? What does an ideal day look like, or do you do co-ops or any of those type things?
We do not do co-ops because I am too flaky to commit to being somewhere all the time and on time and consistently, unless it's church, which my friends laugh at. But I was like, I like kind of having our schedule free and not having too many obligations. But, you know, quite honestly, and it sounds really simplistic, but like an ideal or perfect homeschool day for me is literally, have we done devotions? Have we read our Bible together as a family? Have we read a really good book? And I hugged and kissed my kids and told them that I love them. Like, if we can get that done, I'm happy. But, on the realistic end, we do have, things that we have to accomplish. And so for us, our school day is really short. My kids get up with the sun, and I don't know why they do, but they are usually up about 5:30 in the morning. I am not. I don't get up till 7 because I'm not an early riser. But we try to start school about 8:30, and we're usually done around 10:30 or 11 o'clock. So it's very short. I do about 45 minutes with my kindergartner, and I do about an hour and a half with my oldest son, and then we have breaks kind of in there. We break for snack, and we break so they can go outside and play. But it's really kind of relaxed. We have like our flow. We always start with Bible, and then we do narration, and then we do foreign language, and then I'll let them take a break, and then I'll work with my little guy, and he'll do some reading and some writing and some math, and then he'll get to go off and play. And I get my oldest son, and we do his spelling first because he hates it sometimes, and then we'll do math, and then we'll take a break, and then we all kind of come together and, we read good books for history and geography, and that's kind of, that's our whole day. It's not too complicated, but we are getting, our things done that we need to, and we have literally, almost the entire day to kind of have fun, rest and relax, and just enjoy God's creation and enjoy our family. So far it works out nice. I don't know what we're going to do when they hit like middle school and they have way more work to do than they do now.
Yeah, that's one thing I've heard from many veteran homeschool moms is that when the kids are young in their toddler ages or just kind of getting into elementary school, it's not so much a time to spend a whole lot of time on the academics, but really just establishing those relationships and teaching them how to learn and get excited about learning. So
yes,
I definitely think that's great. Now, let's transition a little bit here. We're going to talk about some of your, I guess, business or professional ventures in the way of your writing. And I've had an opportunity to look around on your blog and to see some of the things you're involved in. Tell us a little bit about, I guess, your blog or even how you got involved with blogging.
Yeah, well, I have always been writing since, I want to say I have a memory of being in second grade and having some downtime, and I was writing poetry. And I remember showing a poem to my teacher, and she was very excited about it, and she was like, do you have any more? And so I wrote some more, and I remember at the end of that first week, she gave me this it was probably a Paul Frank folder because that was popular in the 80s, and she said, here, keep all of your writings in here. And from that point on, I have been writing. And so originally, I just kind of started blogging just as a way to get back into writing after having, my boys. I just was like, I had missed writing, and I just wanted to do something for me. And so that's how I started. And then it kind of evolved into kind of, my ministry and just a way to kind of connect with people and reach out. And so that's kind of what it is now. I blog about whatever's going on in my life. So I blog about homeschooling sometimes, my faith. I blog about being, single. I blog about parenting. Just anything that's going on in my life, I'm apt to end up writing something about it on my blog. And even if I'm contributing somewhere else, those are still the topics that I write about because that's kind of my life and that's who I am. And, I try to be consistent no matter where I am, in my writing.
Okay. Now, have you been able to, meet any interesting people or, get some inspiration or find out you've inspired some people through the blog?
Yes, I always find it so funny when I get emails or I get messages on Facebook, where women are like, I am a single mom and I have been wanting to homeschool and I'm so just encouraged, by your blog. Or it's funny, we were at Teach Them Diligently conference this summer and I finally got to meet some of my blogging friends, and one of them, her daughter was like, are you LaToya Edwards? And I was like, yeah. She's like, oh my God, Mommy, I'm not LaToya Edwards. She's so famous. So I got a good kick out of that, but it never occurs to me to really realize until recently how much of a reach I have, because I'm just like, I just write about my life and just the craziness that's going on and me trying to sort things out. And it's always encouraging for me to hear from other people that it encourages them. I've also been able to meet some really awesome people. I know you mentioned that you found me on Heidi's blog. I actually met her at Teach Them Diligently this summer. And then from that, I ended up, getting to work with her. I got to meet Sally Clarkson at Teach Them Diligently, and I had been Twitter stalking her for a year and a half. So that was highlight of my year because I got to sit with her and just talk to her, and she gave me a hug, and she, just really encouraged me. And that has been awesome. And I just made so many wonderful just friends and connections that I know for sure I would not have been able to make otherwise because I tend to be an extreme introvert and not very kind of outgoing. So my blog has been just a blessing for just friendships and relationships and just encouragement of all kinds.
Yeah, and I think in many instances we don't realize just the reach that we do have, like you mentioned, because you just never know who's taking a look. I just think about, even in my case, had I not reached out to you as a guest for the podcast, and it's quite possible you would have never known that I was even reading some of your posts or looking at things that I could possibly point out even to my wife or to other people that maybe a single mom or something where they'd be blessed by something that you wrote. And so a lot of times you have some people that are going to be vocal and tell you about their experiences with what you wrote or what you said, and then some people we may not discover until we get to heaven. So definitely an encouragement to you to just keep going with it. What would be your advice for a single mom who's listening to this podcast and they're thinking about homeschooling, or they just have a desire to just really teach and work with their children?
Right. I think to that mom, I just first want to just encourage her to pray. Because, homeschooling in and of itself, it's not, it's not like the hardest thing in the world to do, but it takes work. And if you're doing it as a single parent, it's going to be a little bit of extra work because you're doing it on your own. And so, if God has just placed this desire in your heart to homeschool your kids, it's there for a reason. And just if you will pray and just ask him to show you, your path and show you his purpose and his plan. And then just, be patient. I think if my children had not been so little, when I became a single mom, I might not have been able to homeschool them right away. It just kind of worked its way out like that. I have other friends that became a single parent and they had to put their kids in school for a little bit before they were able to pull them back out. So I think it's important to be patient. If God is calling you to homeschool, you're going to homeschool your children. It might not look the way that you want it to look like, but, it will happen. And then just to kind of be open and think outside of the box. Can you homeschool on the weekends if you have to work during the week? Do you have older children that could watch your little guys, while you're at working and you homeschool at night? Is there online programs that might work for you? Just, you just have to kind of get creative and think outside of the box, Maybe you do your lessons in the morning and you have a nanny that can be there with your kids in the evening while you work, it's possible, but, it's going to take some creativity. It might take some changes in lifestyles and definitely some sacrifices, but if it is your heart's desire to homeschool, and God has called you to do that, He will provide, the way and the means for that. You just need to be open to it. And, one thing that I will caution is kind of don't, hide in a corner. This is something that I struggle with as well. There are lots of people out there that are waiting and willing to support a single parent that's homeschooling and to pray for you and to, lift you up and maybe send you some free curriculum or just, sit and help you figure out your plan. But you just have to kind of let people know what you need and then accept that help and that encouragement when it comes because, you could be blown away. I have in the past year. I've been so blown away by, friends and that have just reached out to my boys and I, and they have just really held us up and encouraged me, all year long. And it's not something that I would have experienced if I hadn't been open to it.
Great advice. And I think just as you were mentioning, just some of the creativity that may be involved, I think that even with us as our family is homeschooled, we've just seen so many different, flavors of the scheduling and the timing, and some people doing Monday through Thursday and then taking Fridays off, or like you mentioned, or maybe I read this, just some people doing 5 or 6 weeks and then taking a week off. And then
yes, we do that a lot.
Yeah, and so there's so many options, and that's, I believe, the beauty of homeschooling, because you have a lot of flexibility, and there's no one-size-fits-all solution for any of us, and you have to just kind of find what works best for you.
Yes, and don't be afraid to, switch things up if you find it's not working.
Exactly.
So, I learned that the hard way. Be flexible.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to transition into our last segment here. It's called 7 with Devin. And just going to ask some quick questions and just have you share your best answer for me.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, the first one is, what is a free resource that you recommend for our listeners to check out?
Right. Well, actually, right now I have on my Facebook page, free for people that like my page, I have an ebook, and it's called 31 Days of Encouragement for the Homeschool Mom. And what this ebook is, it's about 60 pages. It's kind of, short. But I work with the Teach Them Diligently convention, and there's a blogging team. And together this summer, we all got together, and we just each wrote just some words of encouragement, for homeschool families and for homeschool moms. And it's put together, in this really, great ebook. And it's such an encouragement for me when I read it. And, I hear nothing but positive things about it. So if you want to like me on my Facebook page, you'll be able to get that for free right now.
Okay, and we'll link up to that in the show notes for this episode, which will be found at connectedhomeschooling.com/episode 8. Okay, on the opposite extreme, what's a paid resource that you recommend? Something that may be a tool that they could use, or a book, or anything?
Right. I'm going to say my probably all-time favorite resource for homeschooling is by Sally Clarkson. Don't laugh, because I am a Sally Clarkson groupie. I love everything about her. But she and her husband have, homeschooled 4 children, and they have a book out called Educating the Wholehearted Child. And it's just awesome. I have read it, I think, twice now. It's one of those things that I pull out at the beginning of every homeschool year. And it's just great encouragement on how to just focus on the heart of your children and, and discipling them, and, how to just keep everything in proper perspective. And Sally shares, stories from raising her kids, and it's just great stuff, great encouragement. And every time that I read it, there's something new that sticks out to me every year. So I highly recommend that everybody, grab a copy of that book and read it often.
Okay, that's something that I wanted to get for our family as well. I don't think I've heard of that resource before, so we'll be sure to check that out.
Yes.
Okay, now think back to, I know it's been a few years now, But think back to the beginning of your homeschooling journey. If you were able to just get a start over, what would be your first steps, or what would be something that you would do a little bit differently?
I would not become a product junkie. I cannot tell you, like, the insane amount of stuff that I bought when my oldest son was, like, 4 for, like, preschool stuff. I probably still have somewhere in my house stuff that I bought and never opened and never used and probably never intended to use, but I got distracted by the shiny as I was researching materials. I would definitely tell myself to put the curriculum down.
Now, what's your best advice for some homeschooling moms if they're first-time homeschooling moms or they're new to it? What's your advice for them?
Oh, my advice to a new homeschool mom, that's funny, I still feel like a new homeschooling mom, is just to kind of relax. Like, we are going to put a lot of pressure on ourselves because I think as moms, like, we want the best for our children. And if you're just starting, especially if you have little ones, just relax. Like, really, they don't need to have, calculus down at 5. Just relax. Work on character training. Like, that's what you should focus on when you're first starting to homeschool, because if you don't have the heart of your children, if they cannot pay attention when you're speaking to them, if they cannot obey what you're saying to them, you're not going to get much done when it comes to your lessons. Just kind of relax and, focus on character, read a lot, take field trips, and just kind of live life and enjoy your family and ease your way into things. My favorite new thing to say is that homeschooling is not about academics. It's about discipleship, and it's about relationships. So, academics are important, but don't let that stress you out, because you'll miss out on the big perk of homeschooling, which is getting to spend time and pour into your children.
Okay. Now, you actually, I think, are answering part of one of my next 2 questions. The first one is, what has been the greatest reward of homeschooling? And then, secondly, what has been the greatest challenge as a homeschooling mom?
Yeah, I think the greatest reward for me has really been just getting to know my boys, because they are, for me, it was really a 180 for my heart to just turn towards being home with my boys. And they are, like, the funniest, goofiest children that I have ever met in my life. And I think, if I was working or if they were gone, most of the day, I would miss out on that. My oldest son likes to write these goofy songs. And, I love it when he runs out of the room and says, "Mommy, listen to this." And he sings me a silly song, or when my little guy likes to come and tell me this joke that he made up that makes no sense, but he thinks it's hilarious. And so that is definitely, the best thing so far, is just getting to spend time with my kids and watching them learn things and watching them work together. It is like the best thing ever. And I'm going to say the most challenging thing for me when it comes to homeschooling has been, I think, dealing with my own sin, because it's really funny that the longer that I homeschool and the longer that I am home with my children, that I realize how much I have stuff that I need to work on, because they will do something and I was like, I don't know where you get that from, and the next day I'll be doing the same thing and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's where you get that from. Mommy should work on that. So that probably is the most challenging thing that I'm right now, is just kind of dealing with my own sin and my own issues. But the perk of that is, like I said, they're home. We get to work on these things together as a family. So it's kind of it's a bad thing, but it's a blessing too. We're all growing together.
That's a story that I've heard before. Actually, one of my previous guests was a homeschool dad, Jackie Bledsoe, and he's a fellow blogger and becoming one of my close friends online. And he just mentioned how when you're homeschooling and you're spending that time with your kids, you can actually point out some of your flaws and things that you need to work on. And I think that it's good. We can all work on it together. It's not something that's hidden for long, because, like you say, you start to see it in your children, and then it's revealed to you, and you realize, hey, it's something that I need to work on. Well, the last question that I have is, what's a unique talent or a characteristic about you that most people may not know?
It's funny. I don't particularly think that I'm very talented. So I'm not sure. I think the one thing, I think I said this already, that people, if you meet me, people don't believe this, especially if they know me, like, from online and from blogging, is that I'm painfully shy. Like, it's really bad because, like, we go to church on Sundays, and there's always a point in the service where the pastor will say, you know, turn to the person next to you and introduce yourself. And they turn on all the lights, you know, all the way up, and everybody's talking, you know, hugging, and how are you doing, and it's so glad to see you. And in that moment, I am, like, staring at my feet, kind of hunched over in my chair, just trying my best to, like, blend into the fabric and be as invisible as I can be. And it's really funny because I think when people get to know you through your blog, you're so kind of just open and, you know, you interact on your blog so much that they don't realize that when they meet me in person. But I am painfully shy. I actually remember at the conference this summer hiding in the bathroom for about an hour because I had kind of just been on overload with talking to people.
Well, I don't think that it's an uncommon problem. I've actually heard some other people that are bloggers or even fellow podcasters say that because with the way our online system is working now and the way people are connecting, people do feel like they know you more and they feel like everyone's an extrovert, especially when you reach out and communicate with people. But it may be a different story when you meet face to face.
Yes, I know. They're like, oh my God. I'm like, I know, but see, if I'm writing, I don't have to look at you when you're talking. Like you're reading the words on the screen and I am, you know, off doing something else. But I'm working on it. I'm working on overcoming that extreme shyness because I'm realizing it's kind of ridiculous, but I do like to hide.
Well, I guess this kind of goes against some of your hiding, but we want to close out the interview by giving people, I guess, the best ways to connect with you. So how can they connect with you online if not offline?
I know. Well, online, you know, my blog is probably the easiest way to find me. It's LaToyaEdwards.net. And on my blog, I have a link to all of my, you know, social media things. But, you know, on my blog, I try to respond to all of the comments, you know, when I can. And I also hang out on Facebook and on Google+. Those are probably the two social media places that I frequent the most. And, you know, email. You know, I love to get emails, and I try to answer them all, you know, within a week or so of getting them. So those are the best ways to get me.
Okay. Well, LaToya, it's definitely been a pleasure having you on the Connected Homeschooling podcast, and we've learned a whole lot, and I think our guests will be very inspired by what you've had to say and what you've shared with us today. So I really appreciate it, and I hope that our guests will reach out to you on social media and also via your blog. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed that interview with LaToya Edwards. And I invite you to stop by her website at LaToyaEdwards.net. And feel free to read some of her blog posts and leave her some comments. You can also connect with her on Google+. And as she mentioned, if you like her page on Facebook, you're eligible to get that free ebook. So be sure to stop by and connect with her on social media and just be sure to tell her that you found out about her on the Connected Homeschooling podcast. If you haven't connected with us yet on Facebook or Twitter, Google+, or YouTube, feel free to do so. And I also invite you to subscribe to our email list. That's a place where we can send out important notices or give you advance notice about guests coming up and give you the opportunity to share your questions and comments and concerns. So we'd love to give feedback as much as possible. Well, next week, we'll have another exciting guest, and I look forward to sharing that with you. And we'll bring you another exciting, encouraging, and inspiring interview. So stay tuned and have a great week.